I, 29 male, am a pretty straightforward guy working in project management, and up until the day I was supposed to get married, I thought I had a totally normal, happy life. My fiancé, 27 female, and I had been engaged for 18 months. We planned this massive, beautiful wedding at a local country club. I had saved up for years, and because her family was going through a tight spot, I ended up footing the entire bill. All $40,000 of it. I did not mind at the time. I loved her, and I wanted to give her the day of her dreams. 200 of our friends, family, and coworkers were sitting on the perfectly manicured lawn. The weather was absolutely flawless, and the string quartet was already playing. It was supposed to be the best day of my life. Instead, it turned into a crime scene. About 45 minutes before she was scheduled to walk down the aisle, the officiant tapped me on the shoulder. He was a retired county judge, an old friend of my dad's, and a real stickler for the rules. He held a manila folder with our marriage license inside. He told me he liked to get the legal signatures out of the way before the ceremony so nobody spilled champagne on state documents later. Made sense to me. I knocked on the thick oak door of the bridal suite and pushed it open. My fiancée was sitting in front of a massive vanity mirror in her custom silk gown. The room was buzzing with her bridesmaids, the air thick with hairspray and perfume. I kept my voice soft and just told her that the judge needed our signatures on the license before we walked out. She did not even turn around. She just looked at me through the reflection in the mirror, her face completely blank. She casually applied a layer of lip gloss, set the tube down, and said she was not signing it. The room went dead silent. Seriously, you could hear a pin drop. One of her bridesmaids actually froze in place. I stepped further into the room, genuinely thinking I had misheard her over the hum of the air conditioning. I reminded her it was the marriage license, the thing we legally needed to, get married. She finally spun her chair around and looked at me with this terrifyingly calm expression. She said she heard me perfectly fine, but she was not signing a legal contract. She told me she wanted the wedding, the gorgeous photos, the reception, and the memories, but she did not want the state involved in our relationship. She actually said she did not want to deal with the tax bracket changes or the legal liability of marriage. She just wanted to do a spiritual ceremony and let everyone out there think we were legally married while quietly keeping things separate on paper. I just stared at her. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. We had filled out the application for the license together at the county clerk's office 3 weeks prior. I asked her if she was joking, pointing out that she waited until right before the ceremony to drop this on me. She waved her hand dismissively, telling me it was just a piece of paper and that our love didn't need government approval. The officiant, who had stepped into the doorway behind me, immediately shut that down. He told her point-blank that if there is no license, there is no marriage, and he could not legally pronounce us husband and wife. That is the law. My fiancée glared at him and told him to just fake it. She actually ordered a former judge to commit theatrical fraud, claiming nobody was going to ask to see our paperwork at the cocktail hour. The judge turned glacial. He handed me the unsigned paper, stated he does not participate in fraud, and walked right out of the room. I looked at the woman I loved and told her absolutely not. I explained that accepting expensive wedding gifts and hosting a lavish reception under the guise of a legal marriage while intentionally refusing to marry me was literally a scam. I told her I was not doing this. That is when the true entitlement of her family reared its ugly head. Her mother stepped out from the ensuite bathroom. She had obviously been listening to the whole thing. She walked over, put a hand on her daughter's shoulder, and looked at me with this patronizing, disgusted smirk. She told me to lower my voice because I was upsetting the bride. She looked me dead in the eye and said this was her daughter's special day and that I was going to go out there, smile, and give her the wedding she deserved, and we could talk about paperwork next year. I was practically vibrating with anger. I told her mother that there is no her day without a marriage. I paid for a wedding, and if she was not signing the document, there would be no ceremony. I told them I was pulling the plug. My fiancée stood up, her silk gown rustling loudly. Just then, her father pushed his way into the room from the hallway. He is a big, intimidating guy who is used to bullying people to get his way. He got right up in my face, pointing a thick finger at my chest. He told me that his business partners were sitting in the second row, family had flown in, and I was not going to embarrass his family. He demanded I walk down the aisle and threatened to make my life miserable if I did not comply. I did not back down. I told him his daughter was trying to scam me into funding a massive party and that the event was canceled. And then they played the dirtiest trick imaginable. Her mother reached into her designer purse, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. She looked at me with pure venom and said that if I walked out of that room and canceled the wedding, my fiancé would walk out right behind me, crying hysterically. She said her daughter would tell my parents, my grandparents, and every single one of my friends that I physically hit her in the dressing room. She said they would claim I slapped her across the face because of a disagreement. Then her mother smiled and asked me who I thought the crowd would believe, a sobbing bride in a white dress or the angry groom canceling the wedding. My fiancé actually nodded along, pretending to wipe away a fake tear to show off her acting skills, and told me to just do the ceremony because it was easier for everyone. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. They were completely willing to destroy my reputation, my career, and my life, just to get a free party and a mountain of gifts. But here's the thing about my job in project management. I am used to dealing with hostile vendors and keeping a record of everything. I had a quick record voice memo widget right on the lock screen of my phone. I slowly slid my hand into my tuxedo pocket and pressed the button through the fabric, praying it activated. I needed them to repeat it. I kept my voice incredibly calm and asked them to clarify. I said, "So let me get this straight. You are refusing to legally marry me. You just want the party and the gifts, and if I cancel the ceremony, you and your mother are going to lie to 200 people and say I physically assaulted you to ruin my life?" Her mother immediately replied, "Exactly. So put your shoulders back, be a man, and give her the wedding." My fiancé chimed in, saying it was just one night, and to stop being selfish. I tapped the button in my pocket again to stop and save the recording. All the panic and heartbreak I was feeling completely evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was trapped in a room with people who were actively trying to ruin me. I needed to take control. I forced my shoulders to slump, let out a defeated sigh, and looked at the floor. I told them they won. I asked for 5 minutes to wash my face and go beg the officiant to come back, promising I would meet them at the altar. My fiancé gave me this sickening, triumphant smile and thanked me for finally seeing reason. I turned and walked out of the bridal suite. I did not go to the restroom. I did not look for the judge. I walked straight down the long corridor, pushed open the double doors, and marched right out onto the lawn where the ceremony was set up. The string quartet was playing, the guests were chatting, and the afternoon sun was shining. It looked picture perfect. I walked past the altar and headed straight for the audio setup tucked behind the floral arches. The DJ was adjusting his mixing board. I walked up to him and demanded his microphone. He looked confused and mumbled something about the speeches not starting yet, but I just held out my hand and told him I needed it right that second. He saw the look in my eyes and handed it over. I flipped the switch on a mic. The heavy outdoor speakers cracked with a loud burst of static. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing. 200 heads turned to stare at me standing alone at the front. I welcomed everyone, my voice echoing across the lawn. I thanked them for traveling, for taking time out of their weekends, and for their generous gifts. Then I took a deep breath and announced that, unfortunately, there would be no wedding ceremony today. A massive gasp rippled through the crowd. My mom stood up in the front row, looking horrified. I did not pause. I told the crowd that 45 minutes ago, my fiancée informed me she refused to sign our marriage license and explicitly stated she did not want to be legally married to me, but only wanted the reception and the gifts. The murmurs erupted into loud whispers. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the doors at the back of the venue swing open. My fiancée, her mother, and her father spilled out onto the patio. They had heard the audio feed from the speakers. They looked completely panicked. I pointed the microphone directly at the patio and continued. I told the crowd that when I called it out as fraud and tried to cancel, her mother threatened me. I announced loudly that her family promised to spread a lie that I physically assaulted the bride in the dressing room if I did not go through with a fake ceremony. The crowd exploded. People were shouting. My fiancé's father let out a roar and started sprinting across the grass toward me, his face red with pure rage. Luckily, 3 of my groomsmen are built like brick walls. They stepped out of the front row and formed a barricade. He bounced right off them, screaming at me. I raised my voice over the chaos. I announced that I had the entire extortion attempt recorded on my phone, and if her family tried to spread their lie, the audio would go straight to the police. I then declared that since I was the sole signature on all the venue contracts, and since everything was paid for entirely by me, the wedding was officially canceled. My fiancé was screaming my name from the patio, crying real tears this time. I let the silence hang for a second before I smiled. I told the crowd that the open bar was fully paid for, the prime rib was resting in the kitchen, and I was suddenly a very single man. I invited my family, my friends, and anyone who actually appreciated honesty to stay for the reception, officially rebranding it as a dodged-a-bullet party. Then, I looked right at my ex and her family and told them the exit was through the main lobby and they needed to leave immediately. I handed the mic back to the DJ. He gave me a look of pure respect, nodded, and immediately slid a fader up on his board. Ariana Grande's "Thank You" next started blasting through the speakers. It was absolute organized chaos. My family rushed the front to check on me. My ex ran across the lawn trying to grab me, but my groomsmen blocked her again. She was shrieking over the pop music, screaming that I ruined her day, that she was calling the police, and that I could not kick her out of her own wedding. I just looked at her calmly and told her to go ahead and call them. She actually did. About 10 minutes later, 2 local police cruisers pulled up to the country club. The officers walked onto the lawn looking incredibly confused. There was a full-blown party starting. People were hitting the bar, and a bride was sobbing near the buffet tables. She ran up to the cops, demanding I be arrested for theft, claiming I stole her wedding. I walked over with the venue coordinator. I handed the officers the printed contracts. I calmly explained that it was a private event, solely in my name, paid for entirely with my money. I pointed to my ex and her furious parents and stated they were trespassing, and I wanted them removed. The older officer looked at the contract, looked at the crying bride, and just sighed. He turned to her father and told them they needed to vacate the premises immediately or they would be arrested for trespassing. The absolute humiliation on their faces as they were escorted off the property by the police, while 200 people watched, was something I will never forget. The second their cars pulled out of the parking lot, the DJ switched to a high-energy dance mix, the caterers brought out the appetizers, and it genuinely turned into one of the best parties of my life. I woke up the next day with a massive hangover, but my brain would not stop spinning. I could not figure out why she was so insanely desperate to avoid signing that piece of paper. The whole taxes and state involvement excuse felt like complete garbage. A few days later, the truth finally came to light. The bridesmaid who had frozen in the dressing room called me. She sounded exhausted and incredibly guilty. She admitted she had found out a secret during the bachelorette trip when my ex got way too drunk, and she had been agonizing over whether to tell me. She told me my ex could not sign the license because she was already married. I felt the floor drop out from under me. 5 years ago, right out of college, my ex had married an international student who desperately needed a green card to stay in the US. His family had paid her $20,000 in cash to do it. They never filed for divorce because it would raise red flags. If she had signed that marriage license with me and it went to the county clerk, it would have eventually triggered a background check or surfaced on her taxes, making her guilty of bigamy. She staged our entire relationship and wedding just to use my money to pay off her massive credit card debts using the cash gifts we would have received. It all made sense. The refusal, the desperate threats, the insane entitlement. It was not just bad behavior, it was an active, criminal cover-up. She fraudulently manipulated me into draining my savings for a wedding she legally could never go through with. I did not text her. I did not call her to yell. I called a civil litigation attorney. In the US, the law is pretty straightforward on this. If someone fraudulently induces you into spending money on a wedding under the false pretense that a legal marriage can and will occur, you can sue them for damages under civil fraud and promissory estoppel. My lawyer drafted an absolutely brutal complaint. We sued her for the entire $38,500 the wedding cost me, plus legal fees. But the civil suit was just the appetizer. The main course was the legal discovery process. About a month later, she was served with the lawsuit at her new apartment. Her lawyer immediately tried to get the case thrown out, arguing that wedding expenses are legally considered non-refundable gifts in our state.
My attorney was ready for that.
We countered by filing a motion to compel discovery, specifically subpoenaing her tax returns and vital records from the state registry. She was completely cornered. During her deposition a few months later, she had to sit across a conference table from me in a sterile law office. Her arrogant, entitled attitude was completely gone. Under oath, with a court reporter typing every single word, my attorney systematically dismantled her. She was forced to admit to the existing marriage. She had to admit on the record that she took the $20,000. She confessed she knew she could not legally marry me the entire time we were planning and paying for the event. Once her sworn admission of the fraudulent green card marriage was permanently on the official court transcript, I dropped the hammer. I requested a certified copy of the transcript, packed it into a neat little folder with a detailed report, and mailed it directly to United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and the IRS. The timeline of justice is slow, but when it finally arrives, it is devastating. A little over a year later, the civil court judge ruled entirely in my favor. He issued a judgment against her for $45,000 to cover the wedding and my attorney fees. Since she had no money to pay it, my lawyer placed a lien on her bank accounts and her car. The federal fallout, however, ruined her life. USCIS does not mess around with marriage fraud for immigration purposes. It is a federal felony that carries massive fines and potential prison time. While I do not know if she actually saw the inside of a jail cell, I do know through the grapevine that her husband was deported. The IRS also audited her, hitting her with massive penalties for the undeclared $20,000. She was forced to declare complete bankruptcy, her credit was obliterated, and her entire family became social pariahs in our town. I walked away from that disaster without a wedding ring, but I got my money back, my dignity remained intact, and I learned one heck of a lesson about standing up for myself. Sometimes, the universe does not just help you dodge a bullet, it hands you the heavy artillery to fire back and level the playing field. If you want to learn how to turn a catastrophic wedding disaster into an absolute masterclass in legal vengeance, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You never know when you will need to turn your reception into a crime scene investigation.